Welcome everyone in our next episode of ZK Talks. Our today's guest is Michael Lee from Abstract Chain. Hello, Michael.
Yo, what's good?
I would love to start with if you can introduce yourself, and this part is most important for me because some people still don't know how skilled people building Abstract. So tell us your story, how you got to Abstract and why you stepped into Web3 from Web2.
Yeah, Michael, co-founder, CEO of Abstract. I pause when I try to kind of talk about my bio because it's the one thing that I don't like about Web2, right? Because again, like a lot of us came from Web2. Like I was, kind of came up through Bitcoin, kind of in the Silk Road days out here in San Francisco, and then kind of in the Ethereum seed round, worked on ETH 2.0 when that was the way to, make Ethereum go fast. But what attracted a lot of us, like cypherpunks, into crypto, is what we disliked about Web2, which is so much of it is driven by cult of personality, right? It was really, there was like Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Larry Ellison, Scott McNealy, and then like you had this new kind of generation of, Zuckerberg, Elon, like the list goes on and on, right? It's very much this PvP, technology against technology, startup against startup, and everyone races to be the standard. And this is why you have Steve Jobs like throwing shade at Bill Gates and vice versa, because they understood like in technology it's a zero-sum game, right? Everyone races to be the standard, and then everyone else, once the winner is determined, fights for the crumbs. And the thing that was fundamentally different about Web3 that attracted a lot of us was it felt more PvE, and you had, Satoshi, like, the GOAT, where, we're not even sure who he, she, they are, right? It could be a singular person, again, like I have my own opinions, but it could also be a collective. And then you also saw this with Ethereum where, Vitalik's like, the front man, but, there's like 15 co-founders, right? With like Vitalik and Joe Lubin and, Gavin Wood and, this whole motley crew. So like that almost felt like Wu-Tang where, it really wasn't built around like this cult of personality around like a singular person. And so I always pause when I kind of explain my bio, because I don't want to fall into that trap where we've had a little bit of that in Web3, right? We had this great start where it was very much about the community, about a movement around Bitcoin, around Ethereum as this programmable computing layer that is now turning into the global settlement layer. And then at some point with, the coins that have popped off in the last 2 cycles, it's kind of reverted back to, specific founders and cult of personality, which I generally just dislike. But, I'm happy to answer any specific questions about my bio, as it pertains to how I can bring this to bear to help Abstract succeed.
I mean, more likely that your experience from Disney or Blizzard that you can actually use in Abstract and give something different what other chains can do.
Yeah, to be honest, like, how I came up, whether it's like through hip hop, streetwear, Wall Street politics, entertainment, like TV, as well as, gaming, like and tech, like, all like the common denominator, like I think as I've kind of not even maneuvered, like to be honest, like my entire career has been just straight up improv, right? And I always caveat this, like there's like I'm of like that generation, like younger Gen X, older millennial, where we were the last generation that kind of grew up both analog and digital, right? Like the internet, the commercial internet that as we know it didn't really pop off until I was like, in high school, right? So I kind of, just grew up like, buying mixtapes off the street, skateboarding around New York City, and then all of a sudden like the internet boomed, right? So I'm probably like that last
I missed
generation.
this. I came after.
Right. Right. Yeah. There's this entire generation that just grew up on, on the internet, that are now, and there's another kind of this like generation that just grew up just crypto native. So I think, my generation, especially of founders, it's very improv. Like we're just literally just experimenting. And that's what gets us excited. I think there's this like younger generation of like, maybe younger millennials, now Gen Z, where they're very intentional, which I love, right? Like my two other co-founders and Luca and Lorenzo, like, for being, young guys, like their business processor speed is just off the charts, right? Like they act like seasoned veterans, and you're almost like seeing this parallels in the NBA, right? Where, guys like, Ant and, all these like, kind of that next generation of new stars, like for whatever reason, they're just like, they're already at that level of like basketball IQ that LeBron, KD, and Steph, it took them like an entire like, basketball lifetime to achieve. So I think that's been really cool. But yeah, I think for me, I think with all these things, experiences, the common denominator has just been like, they contribute to the culture, right? Whether it is the culture that is Wall Street, or gaming, or, hip hop and streetwear, like, they're, the common denominator is like, there's these rabid communities, right? That are part of like a larger movement that kind of help contribute, like, shape and move culture. And I generally find myself attracted to, those things. And crypto is just, another one of those things, right? There's only a few things out there that really like move and shape culture right now. And, it's probably some combination of streetwear, hip hop, gaming, and now crypto. And I guess you can also probably throw in like K-pop, because, I think what BTS and Blackpink have done, it just literally just activated billions of people on planet Earth.
Yeah. I will stay a little bit by Web 2, but the last thing, we see that Abstract is currently focused on gaming, socials, and trading, but also streaming is a big part of it. Here, I would like to know, is it possible to make abstract streaming bigger than, let's say, Twitch and actually bring streamers here and like that onboard millions of people on chain from Web 2?
Yeah, and these things are not competitive, right? Right? Like, abstract, streaming shouldn't be competitive with Twitch and YouTube, and Kick. Similar to how, those things were not necessarily competitive with like broadcast television, right? These things are just natural evolutions of content. And they should hopefully be complementary, not necessarily competitive with each other. And I think the way that we think about it is there's our thesis is really built around consumer crypto, right? And it's this natural evolution of just commerce, right? It's, like as I talked about, having grown up analog, there was this like, time pre-internet where there was just commerce. And then when the internet came, it turned into like e-commerce. And then once that really just, took off, you just kind of dropped the E, and it was just, things like Amazon just became just the primary way to do consumer. And I think, something like consumer crypto is just like a natural evolution. And if you think about it, logically, a lot of the stuff that drives like where consumer is going is the underlying computing platforms, right? And people don't really necessarily think about this in these terms, but it's this underlying computing platform that always shifts every 8 to 12 years, whether we like it or not. And each of these shifts, you literally have this explosion of applications, that these user experiences that pop up. And it just unlocks trillions and trillions of dollars of just commerce. And you can, at least within our lifetimes, you kind of saw this from the transition from the cloud to mobile to containers and now to blockchain. And if you think about it, like obviously they understand like the jump from, pre-internet, right? Like things were running on mainframes and, in their own private data centers. But like, when the cloud first came out, that unlocked two major things. It unlocked Amazon and it unlocked Facebook, right? So e-commerce and social. When mobile came out, the fact that we have these, devices that are in our pockets as we go from point A to B, that unlocked the entire category of mobile gaming, right? Where you don't necessarily have to be, at a desktop or with a console to, slice some fruit, crush some candy. And for me, it was, playing, kind of coming up on Clash. And then there's a camera on there, right? So the camera, allowed for social to evolve into Instagram, right? Where you can instantly capture the moment. And then, the last part, I think what makes mobile a dominant computing environment is the GPS, which is now like it unlocks, ride sharing, Uber. Like before the mobile phone, you're not walking around New York City with, a laptop trying to catch a cab or a car. And then when you moved over to streaming, to containers, and this is what the last thing that I worked on in Web 2 was commercializing Kubernetes. So it was an open source technology out of Google that we then commercialized for kind of Fortune 500 companies. And that thing just took off. Within 26 months product and market, we had $1 billion in annual recurring revenue. We just had product market fit. And the thing that containers really, really did was it optimized for the streaming experience. So our first clients were Netflix, Netflix, Discord, and Twitch, right? And then after all the cool kids were building on a commercial Kubernetes, you had 72% of the Fortune 500, just ape in over those 26 months. And again, like when we IPO'd that was like 2018. So, it's been a minute now. Like that shift into that next computing environment is coming. And that doesn't mean that these previous, applications or computing environments die. It's just like, there's this new computing environment that emerges that allows for, applications that weren't possible before. And then also unlocks a bunch of like, value, at the application layer and hopefully at the user and for creators. So I think that this is where, if you think about abstract, consumer crypto is inevitable, right? Like as blockchain, which has now been, that infrastructure has been incubating probably since the launch of Ethereum, July of 2015. So it's been 10 years. And that's always like the amount of time that it takes for infrastructure to harden, be performant enough for all these like really interesting applications to start popping off. And then when you think about consumer, what abstracts is it's a crypto version of Sony PlayStation account meets Apple App Store meets Twitch, right? It's like the Bloomberg terminal for consumer. Like the underlying chain, the blockchain, which is permissionless to build on, anyone could build on abstract, the blockchain. That is an absolute commodity, right? Because there's, as you track, there's like 217 L2s alone in production or coming out this year. There's another 115 L1s.
Crazy.
Yeah. So
Anyways,
the value proposition is they're all the same. All you're really doing is you're making trade-offs between throughput, security, decentralization. So whether you want to build on Ethereum mainnet versus, Solana versus, abstract, that's dealer's choice, right? The value that we're bringing is the consumer terminal on top, right? Where if you want to do consumer well, you have to do three things. And this is coming from Activision Blizzard, right? Where, I launched Overwatch 2, Modern Warfare 2, and the last game I did was Diablo 4. And the playbook is the same. If you want to do consumer and consumer well, you have to get three things right, right? It's curation, right? As consumers, my kids, as they come onto the internet, they're going to curated marketplaces, right? They're going to the Apple App Store, the Google Play Store. For content, we're going to Netflix, even for e-commerce, we're going to Amazon, right? I think the problem, what you've seen across different crypto ecosystems, these are just, general computing platforms, and you're just dumpster diving for apps, right? And I think that this is what was really like allowed Abstract to really just take off in the 100 plus days since mainnet launch, where there's a level of curation that we just haven't seen in crypto. I think once you get curation right, and you have to keep the standards really high, and this is why when people come in to the Abstract portal, it's really optimized, one, to literally have you come on board in less than 3 seconds, right? You're using email, you're using Touch ID, Face ID, passkey, you're using Google account to come on chain. And once you're there, it's really optimized to where you have a 1 in 3 chance of finding an anchor app that you really enjoy. Because, if you're dumpster diving for an app that you find fun, you're just going to churn out from being on chain and never come back, most likely. So this is why we're super strict on making sure that, the apps that are in the portal, these things are, going to really hit with, they're going to find audience. And then once you do curation, it's discoverability. Once you kind of come in as a user, you have an anchor app, it's, like you come in, multipliers, you're a jam, we'll help you discover other like apps like, Gotcha, right? Or if you're coming in, through Myriad, we'll introduce, other, prediction market, ask adjacent applications. Because what that does is it retains users. Like, user acquisition is really hard. Retaining users is even harder. So, and then once you actually do curation, discoverability, then it's distribution, right? We can get apps from 0 to 1 faster than anybody in crypto, right? Like, you see this, with Myriad, right? Within 2 months, those guys are close to 400,000, MAUs. You have games coming in that are just tripping over 25, 50,000 DAUs, not MAUs, overnight. We're not really out there. We don't have BD. Our BD is developer word of mouth, similar to Stripe. Developer, entrepreneurs, these are very, very smart people, right? And, if you're not in the, I think good ones are not looking, for a handout. They're not looking for a grant to way to make money. They're not, looking for someone to really, help, design, their product. They're looking for users, right? They want the best chance to, launch into a user-rich environment and then get from 0 to 1. Now, once we get you from 0 to 1, it's your job to go from 1 to 100, right? To really, eventually kind of scale out after that. And then we'll meet you on the other side to help you go from 100 to 1,000 with distribution rails, real distribution rails, right? And you've seen this with, Pudgy Penguins, with what they've done in getting distribution into Target and Walmart. You're seeing this now with, Oracle, Red Bull Racing, F1, coming to Abstract. So we're already now, we've perfected, and, there's no perfection. It's just constant. We've done a great job in helping crypto native startups go from 0 to 1. But now what you're seeing with, F1 and Oracle Red Bull Racing is we're starting to plug in, other distribution rails, right? From Web 2, into Web 3 for those projects that, eventually, get from 1 to 100 on their own, on the merits of their product. On the other side, it's hey, we can partner with you and a global brand to take you a little bit farther.
It's amazing. But I have to say, from my own perspective, my experience on Abstract is awesome, and I love it. I have everything what I need there. I don't need to do deeply research, always looking for, what was that? Where should I find it? And mostly verified. Important thing is that verified games or dApps are going to portal, so you are minimizing risks to user that they can lose money or something like that. And that's perfect. That's definitely.
Yeah, no, I think so much of, again, like we're really designing this, abstract to be, the digital Disneyland of fun, right? And part of having fun is like really not having to think about, doing all that research leading up to the fun, right? It's like, I think where you're seeing the stats right now, it's like, in our first 100 days, like we got pretty fast to 2 million accounts organically. And within there, it's 700,000 MAUs, 100,000 DAUs. And what you're seeing is that, people are really treating abstract like the digital Disneyland of fun, where we're not competing with, Netflix or AAA gaming. We are, the space that we're filling in people's, day to day, is, a break, right? Whether you're a student or you're working, and you're just coming on chain from 7 to 30 minutes a day, and you're either playing it, using one of the apps, whether it's, a multiplier, gotcha, a game, Myriad, or you're just, consuming streams, where you're just kind of engaging with creators and, that creators community to, collecting badges. Like there's like a whole world of, things that, we've designed to where hopefully it does feel like a digital Disneyland of fun. And you're starting to see different parts of the park start to open up, right? There's like, I think we really started off in probably the first 30 days where you just saw a lot of games just start popping off. I think On-Chain Heroes really led the charge there, and really set the tone. And then you started seeing a lot of like, a little bit more of the kind of the classic, degen crypto native, applications start to pop up. And then now with kind of F1, Oracle Red Bull Racing, you're starting to see like, here's kind of where like the more family friendly side of, Disneyland starting to activate. So there's hopefully, as we really build this out right, there's something for everybody as they kind of come on chain for 7 to 30 minutes a day. And again, to come back to your question on streaming was really designed for two things. It was designed because, again, like so much of what we're doing is really unlocking the culture economy, the creator economy. And the way that we think about it is like so much of blockchain over the last 10 years, right, since the launch of Ethereum, has really been developer focused, right? And there, if you really want to do consumer crypto, the creator has to, really be on par with the builder, right? Because builders are coming to abstract because, one, we have users and we have high quality users, right? This is why, at least early on, we've been trying to just warn, just like, farmers need not apply, right? Because what's going to really, this is very much like Apple's like ecosystem, right? Where what makes Apple, amazing for developers is that they have this vice grip on users from high GDP markets, right? Because, in order for people to build sustainable businesses, like people have to have discretionary spending power. So, a lot of these like, great entrepreneurs and builders are coming abstract because we have, Gen A, Gen Z, crypto natives, from high GDP markets with discretionary spending power. And then, the next thing is like, how do you get the flywheel of promotion going, right? I'm happy to, whether it's myself, Luca, Saigar, happy to shill projects all day long. Cause it's like, if you're building on abstract, we're bullish. But again, like there's diminishing returns to that, right? You're kind of seeing this with like, even with Jesse at base, it's like, he's asking for other voices to like step up, right? By that time, it's like too little too late. And for us, it's like, what streaming represents is like, if you're an entrepreneur, you're coming in, you look at streaming, you see a marketplace of creators that could be your go-to-market partners, right? And on top of that, it's like so much of these Web2 platforms are built on the backs of content, content from creators. Like, how do we create a more fair system, a creator-friendly system where you start this with tipping, where it's like 100% of the tips go to the creator. Whereas in Web2, it's like a really shitty 60-40 cut at best, right? So again, like we're not being competitive with other streaming platforms. We're just trying to create like a new paradigm using the same streaming functionality. So I think to answer your question, earlier on streaming, like streaming has two purposes. It's to unlock the creator economy. And then two, it's a retention mechanism. And this is why you see Abstract have close to 40% retention rates at the 30-day mark, because, user acquisition is one thing. That's super hard, especially coming from gaming. Retaining users on the 1, 7, 30-day mark, even harder, right? Because when you think of like building an app, there's like a life cycle to apps. The first part of building an app is building something that blows someone's hair back, right? Where you're going to attract users. That is super hard, right? The next phase of it is retention, which is even harder. So if you think about something like Midjourney, everyone, yourself, people watching, they've used Midjourney, which means that team has done an absolute, like, put on a masterclass in building a product that wows people and that where people have tried it. How many people use Midjourney in, day to day, week to week? I'm probably one of the edge use cases where I'll create, children's books with my kids, right? That's an edge case. That's not like, a dominant use case. So that retention rate is pretty shit, right? At the 30-day mark. So even if you have an amazing product that everyone's like, envious of, if your retention rate is 0 or close to 0, you can't get to that third phase, which is growth. So what's the point in like shoveling tens of millions of dollars to do growth if, you're essentially, you're getting users and they're going to 0, right? You can't retain them.
Yeah.
So streaming is a big part of that as well. And this is why we see, close to 40% 30-day retention rate, is because people are coming in and they're using apps, they're kind of watching streams, they're chatting in the streams. Like, these are forms of engagement where it's like, I want to like continue to come back to the digital Disneyland of fun.
To be honest, I'm maybe like 10 hours per day on Abstract. I'm also streaming and also watching stream and doing stuff. So I'm spending my day on Abstract. So
yeah, you're definitely in that super user category.
It can be.
Yeah, no, it's like Warcraft, right?
Yeah,
I think the top 10% of the player base spends like 42 hours playing, because it's not just a game. They're treating it like a social platform. Like, at least as I was coming up, it's like everyone meets at Iron Forge. You just shoot the shit about your day. Yeah, and then you go like on a dungeon and a raid. But then like, the same people who are spending 42 hours a week playing, they're consuming another 24 hours of game related content, like, in the forums and whatnot. So yeah, so I think any healthy product and platform is going to always have like that 10% that are just absolutely like hardcore, which is great.
yeah. We spoke about the crazy numbers, which has Abstract now, and the builders have good opportunities there. So I wanted to ask something different. We already got some heads up from Luca that TGE will be more likely in the last months of this year. But I would like to add that we are in stage right now where space is extremely overfarmed, and airdrop meta is always shifting, and projects looking for the best way how to reward their loyal community and cut off farmers. So first thing is, how will Abstract avoid farmers? And the next thing is, after TGE, how to make these people stay? And if will XP continue also after the TGE and will have another usage?
Yeah. I think as a rule for Abstract, I think its early success is really, there's one play that we have that, it covers everything from how we build the technology, the product, how we build a community, the ecosystem, is the rule of if everybody is going right, we go left, right? So everything about abstract is the opposite of what you've seen. So I think, and we've studied this, right? Like, I've been, in this, I'm a crypto geezer. So I've seen, like, I don't know, even like the earliest meme coins, like colored coins on Bitcoin, right? In the ICO boom and, the last, especially the last 2 cycles, you had, Luca, Lorenzo, Saigar, like, all those guys kind of came up through the NFT boom. So they've seen that. And, we're all experiencing, this cycle together. And so I think it's safe to assume whatever playbook that is out there, we've studied it and we're just throwing it in like the waste bin, right? It doesn't work. The only thing that has really done well this cycle is Hyperliquid. And that is because you have a shit smart, talented team that has a product with product market fit, right? And that, the value continues to accrue back to the token, especially with what they're doing with, buyback and burn, right? Anything else out there, absolute hot trash, right? So I think it's safe to assume anything that we do, right? We're going to go left. When you think about TGE has to always be an accelerant, right? For, and I think what you've seen, I think with other projects that have really stumbled is that it's the end, right? And this is no different than what you've seen in Web 2 with IPOs. The great companies, like the IPO isn't, the finish line, it's the starting line, right? It just gives you a war chest to just absolutely just crush it, right? And this is the difference between like a Facebook, now Meta, compared to a MySpace, right? There's a whole, even in Web 2, think about TGEs like IPOs. Like there are certain companies, certain platforms that really use that as a jumping off point versus an endpoint. And I think the thing that, I think when, I think we were on Luca and I were on a pod together talking about TGE, I think there's 3 things to think about. Is one, TGE has to be an accelerant, right? It has to be no different than what you see in Web 2 with IPOs. Whether it's Facebook, it's Spotify, it's, Uber. It just catapults, user growth, right? Because we now have a war chest to really start to, unlock a lot of the things that start in our pipeline. So that's one. 2, it's less, we've positioned TGE as being market driven versus project driven, right? So a lot of projects literally decide this is when we're going to go, right? Versus literally looking at the market signals, right? And I think the thing to take away from what Luca said is that, if abstract isn't where base is, as far as, Ethereum L2s, as far as, usage, right? Ecosystem, hype, right? Like you're shooting your shot too early, right? And the third part, and I've talked about this a lot, is that there's so many tokens out there. Everyone's fighting for liquidity, and there's so little liquidity in crypto markets.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Unless you're Bitcoin and Ethereum with, ETFs, like everyone else is fighting for crumbs. Like you take any top 30 token out there, you put in a $300,000 sell order, it'll nuke the token, 2%. So you need to also then solve for how do you bring new liquidity into your token, right? How do you bring TradFi liquidity into your token, right? So I think there's another part there where, will TGE, when, some of the things that we're working on to bring TradFi liquidity into the token, come to fruition. Hopefully it's, this year, but, it's these things take time. A
Here's
lot of it's like 5 steps forward, 2 steps back. So I think if we can meet those 3 criteria, right, where TGE really is an accelerant, right, to 10, 50x users, that TGE is, we've earned it as an ecosystem, that this ecosystem is really popping off crypto native startups left and right that are absolutely becoming legitimate sustainable businesses, as well as global brands are building, without pay to play. They're coming here because we have users, right? But the right type of users. And lastly, there is a very specific plan to bring TradFi liquidity to token. If those 3 things, align, and they will, that's when we're game on. But to say that it's like, we have like a button like everybody else and we're pushing that, like on a certain date and time, that's no different than what everyone else is doing. And again, like, as I said, our rule is if everyone's going right, we go left.
Yeah, sure. All right. And about the XP after.
Yeah, no, I think what XP has really done is I think there's so much of this concept of points that has been like really ruined, right? By other crypto projects where it was very much points to airdrop and then you're a down only token narrative. In again, like coming from AAA gaming, like the XP system was really modeled after AAA gaming, right? And this is where again, like I grew up playing Call of Duty and World of Warcraft. So when
CSGO.
Yeah, and like when Warcraft first came out in 2004, that XP system like just revolutionized gaming, because what it really did is that it for the first time it tied progression not only to combat but also to quest completion, exploration, social interactions, and it's really what turned Warcraft into almost like the social platform, like probably what people taught, how people describe the metaverse, like that was Warcraft, right? And I met some of my best friends, coming up and playing Warcraft. And I think what allowed me to like just, I was like Comedy Central at the time, writing shitty, comedy sketches, but like, for half the time, like I was, playing Call of Duty. Like when that thing came out in 2007, especially Call of Duty 4, like Modern Warfare, that introduced an XP system to a multiplayer first-person shooter for the first time, right? Where people are now unlocking, earning these XP and unlocking new weapons and perks and different like abilities. What it did was that now it kind of built off of what Warcraft did, where it just connected this long-term player progression to personalization, right? The different badges, the gear that you had, that was like very reflective of who you are as a player, right? And I think now you've kind of seen these modern XP systems, with like, there's like skill-based XP systems. Like I think Elder Scrolls does this really well. Kind of shared XP systems like what Borderlands does. And I think what the current XP systems is really based on, it's like a dynamic XP system, which I think Cyberpunk 2077 I think did really, really well. So I think you're seeing this now. It's like we've designed it well, and to the point where it, in those early days, it really skyrocketed, user acquisition and user retention, right? And you actually brought, elements of fun to the ecosystem. So I think, the way that we're designing the tokenomics as well is like, the XP system is really built to survive or to last, another 5 years. After 5 years, if people are still, grinding for XP, it's, we're probably not at escape velocity, not as abstract, but just as crypto, right? Blockchains are not going to be like the next dominant computing environment. So that's more, that's more like, our bet that the next computing environment is blockchain just hasn't panned out, versus, any kind of reflection on abstract. So yeah, no, it's really designed for the long term. And then if you think about what abstract is, on the front end, it's a user acquisition engine, right? This is why every top crypto native startup is coming to abstract. This is why global brands that want to cater to a Gen A, Gen Z audience are coming to abstract, right? So, abstract is on the front end a massive user acquisition engine, of Gen A, Gen Z users with discretionary spending power from high GDP markets. And that's reflective in like the user base, right? The user base is very much top country is the US, followed by Germany, then Russia, which again, like people think there's a lot of farmers there, but as long as users coming from like St. Petersburg and Moscow, Russia is like the 9th largest economy in the world. Like, of course we want users from, Russia, Ukraine, right? And then it's quickly followed by Hong Kong, which is a proxy for China. And then in no particular order, the remaining top countries are the UK, France, South Korea, Japan, and Singapore, right? So we're doing our job in making sure that the user base is coming from the right markets. And then from there, it's on the back end. And a lot of that is really driven by the XP system, right? And on the back end of what abstract is, it's a ad platform on crypto rails, right? So when people build out their, on-chain reputation through the XP system, through badges, we'll eventually figure out ways to bring your real world purchases. Like, look at what we did with RET, right? We were able to move close to 300,000 units of, the abstract, REC drink, right?
This was crazy.
In under 40 minutes. So once you start pulling in other data that you're, consuming, so now you're merging your off-chain and on-chain world, consumption together. So now what you've done is that, you specifically, like, it could show that, Max is a top 10% gamer, right? You are also top 1% as far as being on-chain, because you're streaming. You're pulling in different, like things that you consume. So now all of a sudden it's like you can have these large brands come into abstract and treat it like not necessarily Google ads or Facebook ads. That is a one-to-many system, right? Like I put in a bunch of money into, Google and Facebook. I spray and pray, and the conversion rate of getting users to try my product is like 0.00015%, right? But what we're really going after is if I know, if a brand knows that you're consuming water, bottled water, right? But you're drinking smart water. If Fiji Water knows that it's like you're drinking bottled water, I'm not, they're going to, because you have that on your on-chain like reputation, your consumer profile, and the ZK technology, the zero knowledge cryptography, hides your identity. They're able to offer you like almost like a physical airdrop, saying like, hey Max, like we can give you a case of Fiji water at your local Target, Walmart, depending on the market, right? Like, Tesco, Sainsbury. If you go, into the store and if you actually purchase it, you get like that retailer who wants foot traffic will also give you like, 10 USDC. So it's like you as a user, like you're getting these like almost like these like physical airdrops, right? Just for being you, right? Just for doing what you do on chain and capturing a lot of what you consume and logging it on chain. So I think again, like this is where the XP system is very, very helpful. Like those badges, they're fun to collect. They're like Disney pins, or like Chelsea pins for, those that grew up on football. But those are third-party cookies, right? And this is why you see, someone like, Oracle Red Bull Racing be very, very hyped about abstract. Cause like, if you're a big brand, you only care about two things. You're either paying me. So it's the pay to play, which you saw the last two cycles, right? In crypto, or you're able to get me into a younger audience, a younger demographic, right? And when they look at our stats, right, they see that, we've done really well with Gen A, Gen Z from the right markets. To them, it's like, this feels like streetwear, right? Where you have Louis Vuitton collaborating with Off-White. This feels like hip hop, right? Where Jay-Z's like now like a spokesperson for HP laptops, like back in the day. So I think that's where this XP system is very much kind of central, right, to making all of this work, right? Whether it's user acquisition at the front end or, ads platform on crypto rails on the back end.
This was actually really crazy. And yeah, I can imagine that with my on-chain footprint, I will have such opportunities, and it's really crazy when it will work out. Then, wow.
But again, this is like the 5-10 year vision, right?
Yeah, sure.
But not the core team. It's, we're doing it collectively. It's, not just us. It's, the entire ecosystem of entrepreneurs and builders, right? It's the community of, creators and, these community leaders that are really kind of, creating this, I think, the right culture, right? Where it's very PvE, where it's, friendly and inviting, especially if we're bringing crypto curious normies on chain, that it's, that we're not, alienating them because, they weren't, early on Bitcoin or in the Ethereum seed round or, have certain bags or NFTs. It's like, all of that is very much critical to like how we kind of, build this out over the, the next 10 years. And again, like, we're not necessarily just going to be, if the goal is to build like the biggest L2 or chain in general, that's really not that interesting, to be honest. Right. I think, to be a dominant platform for consumer crypto, where someone is going to be the crypto version of Apple meets Google, that's interesting. That feels like, $100 billion opportunity that then unlocks trillions at the app layer, for both entrepreneurs and creators. So yeah, like I think that's what we've been focused on, since day one.
Cool. I wanted to ask about badges, but you gave me your answer already, so don't need to ask anything. I just want to highlight my stats because I have 23 badges right now. I'm missing only the Treador badge and Clippy. I'm working on it.
Yeah, legend.
Yeah, I'm pushing 10 hours a day.
Man, I think a lot of us on the core team long for the day where, we can get abstract, the entire consumer terminal to a steady state to where we can also kind of just jump in and just be on chain, playing games, streaming for 10 hours a day. We still get a couple hours in, all of us, because we're all super fans, on top of just being like, core team members. But yeah, like, again, like this is when I was at Activision Blizzard, like just like you're putting in like 70, 90 hour weeks, like 6 days a week. And it's like, there's just, you're working, you're trying to get these games to a good spot where they can launch. You're watching streams, like you don't really have much time to play. So, but we'll get there.
Yeah, I'm not playing that 10 hours only, but I have multiple activities on the abstract, of course, if it's training or so. So yeah. I wanted to ask actually about Kaito, because we see that abstract is moving always on the top of overall mindshare, but we don't have leaderboard for individuals. But Kaito is definitely part of the game for measuring mindshare. Can we expect in the future, or is there any interest from abstract team to make it happen at all, that we will get leaderboard? I mean, just today launched Cookie and we got the mindshare leaderboard, already, and people love it. It's not working well yet, but people love it. Love to see how they actually interact against others creators, and yeah, I think it can also add something to the community.
I'll take a contrarian approach. I think if you are I think anything pay to play is just negative EV, right?
I mean, yeah, we don't need incentives or something just to see how we are ranked. We do currently the content is organic, not paid, and still crazy.
So I think that's a good sign, right? The fact that there isn't a pay for play leaderboard or incentives, and Abstract still dominates the leaderboards. That just shows that what we're doing organically, right? That we're building the Disneyland fund. People are actually coming. People are actually enjoying themselves, right? These are all good signs. I think dominating Kaido is actually mid to long term, actually it's not a good signal, right? You look at all of those tokens, right? Those projects that, let's say for the last 6 months, that have dominated the pre-TGE leaderboard. How many of those projects do you think will be alive in 5 years? Like, again, I think 99.9% of them are going to be dead, right? Or
yes, I didn't want to say that, but yeah,
no, it's like that's the reality, right? The way that I think about, what is a bull signal? It is the world's largest brands using your technology without some kind of sponsorship or check. They're using it because it's going to help their business, right? This is what we saw with AWS, right? Like when AWS, I think when that come out, like in 2004, like all of the startups coming out of especially out of, actually before Y Combinator, like in I was like 2006, 2008, like eventually all the Y Combinator startups, like the goated startups, used AWS. But in those early days of, AWS, it was adopted by Netflix, Etsy, Dropbox, right? Because the value proposition was, I get to borrow Amazon's technology where I don't have to go out there and buy server storage, networking, have my own data centers, right? I could then take all that cost savings and put it back into the product, right? And eventually when Y Combinator, really started to pop off, all those startups were like, yo, I want to be like Netflix. I don't want to have, mess around and, constantly just continue to buy and scale hardware, right? And so again, now you had all the cool kids starting to use AWS. And then eventually, I think it really broke for enterprises when it was reported that the CIA was, using AWS. But then you also had, kind of Fortune 500s do this well. We literally copied that same playbook for Kubernetes when we commercialized that, to where, you had all the cool kids starting to use it. You had the Fortune 500 starting to use it, and then it just took off, right? So for me, the ultimate bull signal is if you can get large brands to integrate the core technology into their existing core business. Not I think what Starbucks, was doing. It's they had their loyalty app that was on, tens, hundreds of millions of, mobile phones, but they were doing some separate loyalty system on crypto rails on the side. Greenfield stuff is not interesting. I think this is where the stuff that we're doing with Red Bull is super interesting because they're actually using crypto rails to, I think could, kind of pull that younger audience from a Netflix that watch Drive to Survive, from Instagram. These are audiences that they know are fans, but they don't necessarily have access to that data, right? So they can pull them in through a fun, engaging campaign where you're collecting, these digital collectibles, but then you have also an opportunity to, get rewarded with swag, game used, merch, and then also this grand prize to where you get to come to a Grand Prix and meet the team, watch the race from the garage, that's a really cool way to bring a lot of the Gen A, Gen Z, fan base, pull them from these platforms that you don't have visibility into, right? So when you see things like that, it doesn't have to be abstract. That's that's the ultimate bull signal for me, because it's like people are betting these like multi-billion-dollar businesses, right, on your technology, on your community, on your ecosystem, because these are super smart people, right? People fade, enterprises. They've been studying. A lot of them have been studying, blockchain since the early days of Ethereum, and they're just kind of waiting for timing, right? Because they're playing the long game, right? They don't think in terms of months. They think in terms of decades, right? Like, Ford's going to be, Mercedes, Ford, right? F1, NBA, like these are brands, right? Businesses that'll be around for the next 100 years. So again, like that's how they think. So for them, it's like, they're going to kind of pick their spots. So, for me, it's like I'm looking at the leaderboard that is like big brands. If big brands are adopting abstract, that is way better than us being, I don't know, 90% mindshare on any kind of like, crypto native social, info-fi platform.
Sure. I'll take it. I'll take this answer. Maybe I have 2 more questions. So I'm not sure if you are informed or you have some more details, but still, Giga Chat is the most lucrative role on Abstract. Can you share maybe some details or which metrics are included to choose few from so many people? Is there still possibility of also for newcomers to become Giga, or simply it's only for the early supporters? And
No, I think it has to. I think everything that we do, right, whether it is, kind of these specific roles, being a Giga or an elite, to how XP, the dynamic XP system, how it rewards XP and badges like week to week, to, how we're, whitelisting streamers, just to kind of make sure that the streaming platform kind of, scales like appropriately. And, or even like how we select apps to be in the portal. And I think all these have like there's elements there's some parts that are objective criteria, and some are subjective, right? So I think if we're very specific about, you do X, Y, Z, that equals a specific role, or this is how you get your token, into tipping, or this is how you get, a spotlight or a badge, if you're an app. It's not that crystal clear, right? It's you kind of have a sense of like, is this app going to perform well? If we send users to it, like, will users get excited? Will it retain users at the 30-day mark, right? Same thing with Giga. It's like, everybody's different, right? Everyone has different talents to bear, to really promote the ecosystem and build out the community. Some people are really good at onboarding people. Some people are really good at helping projects, go, kind of, if we can help them go from 0 to 1, they can help them go from, 1 to 100. Like you just saw a lot of these folks, who are helping Scarly with, in the early days of, On-Chain Heroes launching. It's like, and then there's other people who are really good at partnerships that you'll kind of see later on, right? And so people contribute to the overall ecosystem and community differently. So you can't really, make it very like, programmatic. I think it's, you have really smart people on the core team, in led by Hedge, and, they do a good job of just watching, and just observing people, just seeing how they contribute towards growing the community and the ecosystem. And then, obviously they'll rank people up, as they see fit.
Sure.
So, it's probably not the, it's probably not like it's kind of like when TGE, like it's not like a specific date. It's like, there are these like factors that are outside of our control, and we're just kind of observing these things. And if, certain things hit, then yeah, like it feels right to rank someone up. And again, it's like, but it's also designed to where I can see how people get antsy about it, because if you think that, this XP system, drops off at TGE, then yeah, it's like, there's just like, clamoring to, get ranked up, and you kind of get these multipliers and unlocked. But if I would just encourage people, to play the long game, because, myself, Luca, Lorenzo, Saigar, like the whole crew, like we're, in it for the next, 10 years. So to really see consumer crypto through. So it's really designed to where there are kids now that are like 10 years old, right? In 5 years time, maybe less, right? They're coming on chain, and they should have the same opportunities that, you had, right? To come on, be a creator. They should have the same opportunities like, like Marianne and others, right? To be able to, really help shape the go-to-market of, these apps that are popping off. So yeah, so I would just say, just like, just come on chain, have fun, be opinionated about, what are the things that excite you in the ecosystem, be able to build relationships with those projects. Obviously be super creative in, how you promote abstract or just consumer crypto in general. And the team is watching. And we'll rank people up as, I think as, not as we even see fit. It's more as an example. It's like when you rank someone up, what you're telling to the rest of the community is like, that is like really good behavior. Like that is like something that really like is like, that really contributes to pushing crypto, the thesis of consumer crypto forward. And then people will be hopefully inspired by that. Right. But just, for people to like, maybe like try to copy what someone else has done, that doesn't work either. Cause like that worked maybe Q3 of last year, right? Where
sure.
The ecosystem
You must be simply, you must be simply the best in that what you are doing, and then you have the chance and not copy. It's clear to me. We also saw that there is a possibility to get the rank from Giga in the past. I am not sure if you missed it or not.
People are also getting deranked. So
yeah,
there's kind of this like Premier League, both for streamers as well as, people that hold rank. It's like, there's, relegation, like, then there should be, right? Because otherwise it's like, you just end up with a lot of bloat, right? So, there are some people who will contribute for like this period of time, which is great. And hopefully, having a certain ranking, a level, like, means something, as you kind of navigate through the ecosystem and the community. But, it's, I don't know, it's like, I used to be like second Grand Marshal, like in my server in Warcraft. It's like, I'm not that anymore. Like, because I'm not grinding and, playing 40, 50 hours a week. So I'm okay with that. Right. I'm off doing other things that, that interest me.
Sure. All right. Maybe the last question. I know it's better to stay unbiased, but anyway, I would like to know what are your top projects right now on Abstract. I mean, the builders which are here, so you can maybe share who is building something which is really different and have another vision, and it's not still the same.
That depends week to week, to be honest, right? Like I'm discovering again, like I kind of have a preview because I'm helping the core team led by Mason to really kind of curate the pipeline. And right now I think we're about 471 projects in the pipeline. So I get to see a lot of these projects as they kind of go through different phases as they get to launch. but I think a lot of it really depends week to week. To be honest, like, this particular week, I'm super hyped on, obviously, Monsters Fun, right? Because again, like it's just like a fun way. It's like, it's like Pokemon meets AI, right? And I'm more just intrigued on like, I think within gaming in general, it's like, how can you use AI where you're enhancing like, the fun factor. And that's what Monsters Fun represents to me. Um, you know, probably what 2-3 weeks ago, really loved what Bitcoin was doing. I still do. As they kind of hopefully evolve into more of a token launching up platform. But I thought they really like, at least for crypto geezers like myself that came up through Bitcoin, it's like, that just those were, it kind of brought back a lot of fun memories. And even just a lot, you saw a lot of these like Bitcoin maxis like come into the ecosystem, because again, like that was like, I think it was very nostalgic, right? It's like, it kind of nostalgic because you kind of came up through Bitcoin, and then nostalgia because we also, a lot of us grew up on like these like pixel games, right? Especially like when I remember when the Nintendo emulator really kind of brought a lot of those old school Nintendo games back. So it had that like that vibe to it. And then obviously this week, all things F1 Red Bull Racing. Like, I'm super hyped up on that one, just because I think one, it's really cool for Red Bull to use the blockchain as a way to essentially build up their base of Gen A, Gen Z fans. And then for fans, I think it's super cool where it's like, it's this like interesting way that there's going to be like a raffle component to this, right? Where, you're able to, get access to swag, to, game, game used, driver autographed memorabilia, to, actually going to a Grand Prix, at the same level that, that the celebrities that you see are showing up. And I think that's a level of, I think just continuing to like making sure that the sport goes, passes down to the next generation in a very like healthy way. Again, as someone who grew up on the circuit and loves F1, like I think that's something that, again, like I'm super hyped on that one. And next month, it'll be different, right? It'll be, I'm just always down. I'm always super hyped on like people that are really using abstract, the technology, the kind of the consumer terminal, in a very clever way, to hopefully create like net new, like, crypto consumer experiences.
Yeah, sure. All right. I think I've got everything what I wanted, because my point is that I'm not just writing or speaking about something. I have to use it. And now I'm simply user of abstract, and I want to know some stuff about it. And that's why we are doing this. So maybe if you can share some alpha as last thing here, what's coming in the near future, something.
I think maybe there's like alpha, like around like, I think there's like generally 3 categories that people want alpha on, right? I think the first one is, related to token, right? You can kind of cover that, what are the triggers for TGE, right? And again, it's, those 3 criteria, right? We gotta make sure that, that TGE, like an IPO, is this launch pad, right, for user acquisition. It's also, we have to earn it as an ecosystem, right? That we, if at least on Ethereum, if base is the big dog, like we gotta catch up, right? And then lastly, what is a mechanism to bring TradFi liquidity into the token? So you're again, you're not PvPing with other coins for the scarce amount of crypto liquidity. So I think that's one category of kind of alpha that people are always looking for. I think 2, alpha around like, projects launching, both crypto native startups that are launching, as well as global brands. I think on the crypto native startups, like, it's those projects are pretty good about like early signaling, right? Like Monsters Fund has been like in the pipeline for a while, as well as like, you know, Gotcha before that, and On-Chain Heroes, Myriad. So I think just gotta just stay on the timeline. And if you don't really have time, just the abstract handles channels, they do a nice job of, of sharing kind of the things that we're excited about that are, kind of queued up to launch, in a reasonable amount of time. And then on the global brand side, I think that stuff is a lot more longer lead, but we've been working with a lot of these global brands probably since summer, Q3, F1 Ripple Racing coming out, that's been cooking for a while now, and you'll see a couple of others starting to pop off. It's always their news to share. So I kind of leave it to them to, own the moment, and us just obviously, sending our giant like user base to them. And the last category it's more for like the nerds like myself out there, where it's just more, how do we continue to make sure that the chain is more and more performant, right? No different than like an F1 car. You're just constantly making adjustments to the powertrain and the rest of the car to increase performance. And you're seeing that, right? We just shipped EVM equivalents last week that unlocked OpenSea. It'll unlock a lot of other kind of OG crypto protocols, and then you're also thinking about it in terms of like, how do we ensure that the performance of the chain, fees continue to get lower, chain gets faster. Already we're thinking about, how do we get to 200 milliseconds of block times? And again, it's like Solana, if that's the gold standard, that's 1,000 milliseconds of block time. Like to be at 200, like, we are, because, so most chains are at 1,000. Solana, to their credit, is at 400 milliseconds. And then Abstract is coming in, right, at, 200. So that's pretty exciting. And then the last part is decentralization. Every L2 centralized sequencer, right? It's all going back to that core team, which that is complete. That's the complete opposite of what Bitcoin and Ethereum are. So I think we're pretty hell-bent on making sure the sequencer is decentralized, so we can kind of join Bitcoin and Ethereum and just, ensuring that, this core team isn't, this like, bottleneck for running the chain. But again, like that's more the technical side, that
Yeah, sure.
a small number of people get excited about. But again, like, that's also kind of, a version of alpha that, people do follow closely.
Great to hear that. So yeah, I think I got everything. Really, thank you for your time.
Yeah, no, appreciate you and appreciate all those watching. Cause again, like, I'm equally grateful for you spending, hour plus, as well as people watching, spending an hour plus out of your day, because time is probably the most precious resource. So appreciate you all. And then obviously the only thing that I ask of all of you is just continue to send us your feedback, right? That's been unbelievably helpful for Saigar and team to really start to like inventory all the things that, we want to continue to improve about Abstract, as well as being able to rack and stack, in what priority.
Sure.